Hi, everybody. Welcome to Founders Focus, the Startup DC edition. Rachel, thank you for all of your help in getting things organized here. And thanks, everyone, for joining. I am Scott Case, the co-founder and CEO of Upside, and we are going to have a fantastic session today. As we've said in the past, we are recording this mostly it'll be myself and Toby. However, we would like you to participate, so please use the chat feature in Zoom and ask your questions along the way. If you can just put in all caps questions so we can peel it out of the Zoom, the chat, that would be awesome. We also have a fantastic ASL interpreter. Stephanie has joined us, so props to Stephanie for keeping up with my high-speed speech. And we would love for you to ask questions along the way, and if you are brave, it's the pandemic, so showering is optional, so please do turn on your cameras. It's always helpful for myself and our co-hosts to see your faces, nodding heads, confused looks, etc. And with that, I'm gonna turn things over to Toby in a moment. So Toby Moore has joined us today. He's the co-founder and CEO of Optoro. He's grown the company from a scrappy startup, and we're going to get into his roots a little bit here, to a giant success in the retail space, particularly helping retailers address a $500 billion market of all the stuff that you all return when you decide that it doesn't fit the way you expected it to, or whatever other challenges you have. It's got to end up somewhere, and Toby's built a really cool business around that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Toby to introduce himself, and then we'll dive into a fun conversation.
Thanks, Scott. Good to see you all. Happy that we're able to keep DC Startup Week going, even if it's virtually. I started Optoro back in 2010 with a couple co-founders in DC, and even before that, started a smaller startup in 2004 in the DC area. I'm also a DC native, and so I've spent many years in the Washington area and have seen it grow a lot, and have also seen the DC tech community grow from nothing in the early days to a great community today. We're down in Chinatown. We have about a couple hundred people in the DC area working at our offices, all virtually right now, of course. But we also have a R&D facility operations facility down outside of Nashville as well. And more and more people around the country and around the world every day as COVID goes on.
Awesome, Toby, thanks. I think that it would be helpful for all of us to get a little bit more detail on what Optoro does, what's the key problems that you solve, and kind of where are you, and let's start with where were you coming into 2020? So just sort of lay out, what do you do and why do you do it?
Yeah, so we started Optoro when we recognized that there was a major problem in retail where there was a lot of waste. I know there's a study in 2018 done by the UN, and one of the results that they came up with was that by 2050, with the level of consumption going on that we have today, and with the population worldwide growing to 9.7 billion by then, and middle classes around the world growing, we'll need 3 times the Earth's natural resources to keep up with our current lifestyles. So it's just unsustainable in general in terms of all the waste it creates, but also we won't actually have the resources to do that. And so, when we were seeking out to find problems to make retail more sustainable, and one of the areas where we saw a huge issue was in customer returns. And this is an even bigger issue with online sales, where the return rates are as high as 25%. But now there are over $400 billion of customer returns in the US a year. It creates over 5 billion pounds of waste. And when you expand beyond that and look at all consumer products that people don't want, that they can trade in or return back, it's an even bigger problem than that. So at Optoro, we set out to solve that problem and build a platform to facilitate circular commerce for retail returns and trade-ins of products, for whether it's 30 days or years down the road. So really what our platform does is It connects each unwanted item to its next best home as efficiently as possible. And there's really three components of it. We focus on making it easy for people to return the goods, so returns experience, making it easy to manage the processing of returns, which we call returns management, and then making it easy to resell, repurpose, recycle, or donate those goods coming back, which we call re-commerce. We work with Best Buy, IKEA, Staples, Williams-Sonoma, to name a few of the big clients. And really going into 2020, the focus was actually on improving returns experience for online returns and expanding our supply chain offerings. So we were fortunate enough where we actually already were investing in it. I mean, e-commerce, as everyone knows, was already a major growth area, so we're focusing a lot on that. And yeah, so that was where we were going into 2020.
So I want to unpack a little bit just for everybody who's thinking through. Can you just take us through sort of a typical good, maybe a specific item that kind of gets returned and how it makes its way through its next phase? It could be anything that you guys naturally see inside the business.
Yeah. So if you were doing a return and with a client where our technology is in use, it might start with your phone. So you click on the past order through an email or by logging into a site. It would take you to a returns portal. You'd answer a couple of questions on why you're returning that item. Is it new, not new? Is it broken? What's the main reason? Then the portal would give you a QR code and tell you some locations nearby where you could drop it off, or you could print out a label also and ship it. At that point, our platform would have what the item is that's being returned. It would have also the condition of it given by the consumer, so we'd know that you're returning a Yeti or something, and it's slightly used. And then with that information, we would then route you somewhere to drop it off or ship it. And once that good hits our system in the supply chain, it then directs where that product should go. So our technology is used in storefronts and in distribution centers that are used to receive, process, test and grade returns. And it's all automated, telling the different co-workers in those spaces what to do with the products. And then once a product is in the supply chain, our system connects into all of the channels where those returns can be resold or recycled. And it'll actually direct it onto certain websites and provide content and pricing to remarket that product in its new connected to charities. And it'll send it to charities that are in need of those goods, or send it to recyclers that can repurpose it. And so we're actually the technology that is used from the very beginning to the end, connecting that product and automating the process along the way.
I like your description of it being kind of re-commerce with an R in front of it, and the idea that something that a pair of sneakers that I bought that for whatever reason they didn't fit or I don't want them anymore can kind of make its way back around and maybe show up on eBay where somebody who's excited about it can have it. And if it's damaged in some way but still usable for parts or something else, somebody else gets it. It's a cool way to close that whole system out. Who are some of your biggest partners? Where might we experience this from a customer standpoint? Like, who are your big clients?
Yeah, so our biggest clients are Best Buy, IKEA is another really big one that we work with, Bed Bath & Beyond, Williams-Sonoma, to name a few of them.
Got it. Awesome. I remember a few months, probably maybe a month and a half ago or so, you and I got to catch up. It had been a while. In fact, the last time was probably pre-pandemic. And you were gracious enough to ask me how things were going. And I was smart enough to summarize them as, hey, we're in the business travel space. We figured out a way to win. And, it's been challenging, but, we've sort of got it. How have things been going for you? And I remember thinking, it's been challenging. I've had my own challenges. And then you described to me a little bit how your march began. Now, many of us look back at March and think, man, that was the month that, talk about in like a lion, out like a lamb. We got in like a lion and out like a tornado on top of a hurricane, in a roller coaster ride. But you had a very interesting experience at the beginning of March. You want to tell us a little bit about that? Because you had big plans that got massively disrupted in an unexpected way.
Yeah, I think you weren't expecting my rambling answer that came as a response. I feel like, yeah, I don't know, like I'm Forrest Gump or something, everywhere where something's happening. But yeah, I think it was April we caught up, and you were saying how things had gone. So our March started. Unfortunately, our R&D center, our operations center in Nashville, got hit by a tornado and totally destroyed and turned to rubble. So that was 2 weeks before COVID really set in. It was like March 3rd that it happened. And so we were, fortunately everyone
I want to just pause you there. How big was the facility that you had just opened, just to give an order of magnitude scale?
That one was, it was 350,000 square feet.
I just want to just say out loud, 350,000 square feet. That is that's not like a building got knocked down. That is like a no kidding around operations center that had a lot going on in it. I think you said that nobody was hurt or injured because of the timing of it, at least within your facility.
Yes, that was the biggest thing. We were very fortunate that it happened at 1 a.m. We do run night shifts a lot, but we were just lucky that night we didn't have one going. And so our entire staff was safe, which was great. And so it became an immediate sprint for us to recover from that. That facility launches a lot of pilot programs for us. So we had 14 different clients who had programs going on through there. And we basically had to find a new facility and get set up within the week with that, so we didn't disrupt the business with our clients. And so that actually mobilized us a couple weeks before COVID, which helped in terms of the communications. But yeah, so we had a tornado hit. I then went out and was visiting my family. We're meeting up like the following week, and my brother shows up the week before everyone goes to shutdown, and he has COVID. And so I get stuck with him for 2 or 3 weeks while he, goes through, all the worst symptoms. And then while I'm doing that, where we were, an earthquake hits. And so I'm going through an earthquake, and it was it wasn't huge. It was like a 5.8. I was out in Salt Lake City, and buildings fell down and the airport was shut down. And then the next day, my aunt who lives down the street from me, her house burned down. To the ground. And then I finally get back to DC like a couple of weeks later, and we have one of our huge storms and my basement floods completely. So I got hit by tornadoes, pandemics, earthquakes, floods, fire, and I'm now just waiting for the locusts to come.
I think you've gotten you got a really nice dose of the full complement that 2020 has had to offer all of us, and the challenges were piling up. That said, here we are in September, and you made a bunch of changes to your business to adapt. So can you take us through kind of from an Optoro business standpoint, what have you done, and how have you kind of shifted the business to be able to continue to be effective and continue to grow?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time, and as I mentioned, the tornado probably helped us kick off extra fast because we already were set up in emergency response mode. And I'm sure, like most people running companies here, we're running most of our business completely virtual. We do have the operations center in Nashville that is essential workers and has been open the whole time. And we do have people who do implementations for other big warehouses around the country that also have been working. But the retail world was hit pretty hard, and we had our big clients. They had their stores shut down for a couple months early on. They had their supply chains disrupted, and they had massive surges online. And so, when we were hit by all of this, the first thing was make sure that all of our people are okay, they're supported, they're safe and as healthy as we can help them be. And so that was our first focus, was down in Nashville, separating people, creating different shifts, having temperature checks at the beginning, putting up plexiglass, putting in all the different protocols to be safe down there. And we've been very fortunate to be incredibly safe down there. And then we set up constant communication, so we had to redo all of our communications and make it all virtually, make it happen more often, to keep everyone to speed on everything. And then, so after focusing on the people, there was a business side where we were worried, like everyone else, what was going to happen to business. So, look at, were there any frivolous costs, or obviously travel was an easy one, unfortunately, for some to cut, but we weren't going anywhere. We didn't have office expenses. So we cut back on some of that. And then we turned to looking at how could we help our clients. And, they were in need, and the retail world was shifting a lot. So there's a couple big areas that we looked to focus more on. One, there's a lot of supply chain disruption going on. So how could we help people pop up new facilities or find space for them where we could help them run facilities for their surge in online returns, or for goods that were stranded in certain states when facilities were shut down. So we did a lot of work there early on, helping clients with this, and popped up new returns facilities quickly for them. We actually had, again, developed this muscle really quickly. I had done a test run because of the tornado, where we had to pop up a new facility for 14 different clients. So we had already done a practice run and were ready to do this quickly. And then the next phase that we focused on was really returns. Is 25% of online sales. And a lot of these brick and mortar retailers were used to 7% returns back in their storefronts. So we really focused on helping them come up with solutions to make the returns experience better and less wasteful. And that's an area where you can do a great job and get people to love the customer experience and come back, or you can do a bad job and you get all these new customers. If they end up returning an item, it's a bad experience, they don't come back again. So we really sat down and mobilized a lot of our team to focus on returns experience for online sales.
So we got a question from the audience here that's kind of related to that returns experience. How do you combat, fraud of all types? Presumably, people either intentionally or accidentally misrepresent the quality of the good, or how used it is, or the product itself, and or return something different than what they said, and they're seeking a credit for it. How do you monitor that, and what do you do to reduce the risk there?
Mm-hmm. Well, so there's different, depending on the retail client, there's different rules that they'll have. If a different item is returned, some retailers just want it to be a great experience, just give a refund right away, and we'll just deal with the risk. And they'll, it might be 1.5% of the goods are fraudulent, they get returned, but for them, it's better just to focus on a good experience. Others will have rules where you don't pay them out if it doesn't match. And in terms of other fraudulent activities, we don't keep the customer data ourselves. So often what will happen is a retailer will have the customer data. We'll have the conditions and matching of the goods versus that customer number that will feed on to the retailer. So they'll be able to have systems that will say, okay, this person has done it once, it's a mistake, we don't blame, but if it happens like a second time or a third time, they might blacklist people actually. And they also have, these bigger companies have full fraud departments that will look for organized crime schemes that actually will end up happening. So we provide the data, and that comes from the returns. We actually don't do the fraud analytics ourselves. That's often an internal thing they do.
Got it. So you're part of the solution, but it's not on you to prevent that, other than to report, hey, this was returned in a condition other than we expected, or this wasn't even the right product, or whatever it is, and then they kind of handle it from there. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So I'm going to shift gears to kind of the internal side of things, and I'll do a little audience participation here. So in the chat, I'd love for you, for anybody who's running a business of any size, just post in the chat, how many people do you have in your company? If you're by yourself, just put one. If you've got 10 people, 10's good. Just to get a sense of kind of the scale, the rough scale of folks that are participating today. And with that, Toby, you have a pretty large team. You were distributed in some ways before the pandemic. You had multiple offices, but you also had a central core. You were you were named a top workplace by the Washington Post for 2020. You obviously did a great job motivating your team and your culture in 2019, which is when that award was evaluated. How have you shifted into the pandemic time, and what has that been like for you? What things did you bring forward and adapt, and what things have you had to reinvent?
Yeah, so the first thing we wanted to focus on was communications. This time with so much change. So we initially actually were doing daily all hands with the company. Then it went to 3 times a week, and now we've settled on weekly all hands with the entire company, and that's been working really well. During those all hands, we'll go over any major updates. We'll go over progress against goals. We'll do a Q&A session, and then we'll do a deep dive. And then something we also started doing during those recently, which I actually got from you, Scott, was using the Zoom feature where you can do breakouts for random connections. So each week we'll pick a topic like, what was your first job? And you get broken out with 3 random colleagues and have 5 minutes to talk about your first job. And that's to try to replace that random coffee, the connection that you have around the coffee machine. So that's something we've looked at. We did volunteering was a big part of our culture before. And, it's been harder since a lot of people are worried about safety to get together and do things. So we did a volunteer day where we did have some people outside in person, but we did a ton of it. Everyone did virtually, and people were slacking about it, taking pictures, going back and forth. So we did a volunteer day, and we've done trivia nights, which has been helpful. And then what else? The other thing I've done is just create a list of people to constantly rotate through to connect with, and have done lots of walk and talks with them. And so I'll do that on certain days. Fridays is usually one I'll spend several hours at the end just trying to connect with different people to do that.
Has the cultural vibe shifted or changed at all? I'm sure you've added people to your roster. I'm sure some people have left. How has that been different through the last 6 months?
We've seen people moving, so we've had more remote requests than ever, as you can imagine, and not just temporary moves. People are I think taking this as an opportunity to say, hey, I know the company's gonna be flexible now, and they're probably gonna have to be flexible afterwards. So people are assuming that I think we're gonna be flexible long term. So which I think we likely will, and most businesses will be much more flexible in terms of remote working. So that's one of the things that we've seen change. Culture-wise, it's not fun being on Zoom all day, every day. So I definitely miss being in person. I think other people do also. I know some people on the team are starting to go on walks together and meet outside with a whiteboard. So there are people who are safely finding ways to meet up if they're up for it. So I do wish we could find more ways to do that. Or we're thinking of having for those who want to attend a company picnic, you all just bring your own blanket and you all have to sit like 10 feet away from each other. I've done it with family and friends, and it seemed to work pretty safely that way.
Got it. All right. Well, we're going to turn back to your kind of business from a I guess an operations standpoint. So the category of your business is interesting because you're really like a network of both retailers on one side and retailers and distribution partners on the other side, and you're kind of connecting all those pieces together. You've got a logistics business in the middle of it. What have you done as a kind of an aggregator. You're aggregating lots of these pieces together to create a moat around your business, to protect it from a competitive, from the competitive landscape. And do you have competitors that are in the space already, or were there before you?
For us, it's about the data. Is crucial, and our product spans across all the solutions for returns. And what's really crucial is having the information on what all the markets are paying for these products coming back in different conditions, but then using that data to power the routing of the goods from when they're first coming back. And so, you can't do a good job routing goods logistics-wise from when a return is initiated if you don't know what market it should go to and what it's going to sell for and how it should be processed. And so for us, it's really been having the data from where the returns are initiated, the data from all the logistics facilities that are tied together to process the goods, and then having the data and the network from the e-commerce side. And the other thing that helps us build a moat, and so if we have a client, the more products that go through our platform, the better our routing algorithms will be. So we have machine learning in place that's collecting data from each outcome and adjusting based off of supply and demand and logistics costs and all. So the more we do, the harder it's going to be to replace that. The other thing that is important is building a network. So as we add bigger clients, more and more of them, we're building best-in-class processing networks for those categories of goods. We're also building best-in-class e-commerce channels for them and drop-off points for these returns. So the more people we have on our platform, the better our network is for processing returns that other people can use, and it makes us that much better.
Got it. Cool. So you part of your business mission is to reduce overall landfill waste and make sure that we've got the resources we need to have a sustainable planet. How are you measuring and demonstrating that? Like, what are you using you talk a lot about data. Do you have any way of knowing what percentage of the returns that sort of aren't going through you are continuing to go to the landfill, and how many, I don't know how you measure it, pounds of waste you're actually avoiding going to landfills? Like, how do you track that, and how do you demonstrate it to your key stakeholders?
Sorry, there's a vacuum cleaner that I hear starting next door.
Hopefully we can hear you fine.
We have a sustainability team, and what they do before we start working with, or before we implement our technology with the client, they measure all the waste that's generated from their returns. And so they actually go in and they look at how all the returns are being routed, how many times they're shipping in the current setup, what's going to landfills. And so we set a baseline off of that. And then when we put our technology in place, we measure the difference. And in many cases, it'll be 50% to 70% reduction in waste generated from returns for those clients.
Wow. And so do you aggregate that all up on a monthly or quarterly basis and kind of share it with the world? Like,
we do, yeah, we aggregate it on a monthly, but pull it together on a quarterly basis, and then we have a sustainability report that we share with our investors once a year. Wow,
that's amazing. And do your employees have visibility and all that? Is that part of what, keeping from an employee retention standpoint, is that part of your strategy?
They do. We need to get better at doing it more real time. We used to report it on a monthly or quarterly basis. I would say one of the areas that we could improve during this virtual time is having just better real time dashboard for different important metrics. But yeah, we try to message that out to our employees. I mean, they're very sustainability focused and are motivated by making a positive impact.
Awesome. So a lot of the folks joining us today are in a range of different businesses. Some of them are service providers, some of them are building startups, some of them are solopreneurs. We're all facing a different world kind of in the pandemic and then kind of post-pandemic. So as you're planning for Optoro, when you look at the next 12 to 15 months, let's say between now and the end of next year, what are the big things you're planning around? What do you see as either the key future elements that we all should be paying attention to, or that in particular you're paying attention to for your business, given that you touch a lot of commerce overall, which is a big part of the economy? What do you see kind of on the nearish term horizon?
Mm-hmm. Well, we see we're focused on retail, the massive boom in e-commerce and all the trends pointing to e-commerce is now accelerated 5 years ahead of where it was. Everyone was investing in it, but all these investments have been pulled forward. So, we believe that e-commerce, it'll dip a little bit, I'm sure, when COVID ends. But the fact that people have been forced for a year to adopt online only, half the battle is just getting people to adopt these new habits. And so it will continue at a much higher rate than before. And retailers will continue to invest in e-commerce enablement. So for us, we're going to just continue to double down and triple down on focusing on e-commerce returns. And even, if there's, big problems and stuff in brick and mortar, investment's not going to go to storefronts. People, retailers, even afterwards, are still going to be focusing on e-commerce because they're going to be playing catch up also to all of the supply chain problems that they've had. I think the interaction between mobile and stores will be more seamless. So, people will go back to probably picking up more items in store, but they're still going to, buy online. People will even be buying online in stores a lot more. I think that'll be natural. I think mobile payment will be another thing that everyone does. It'll be Apple Pay or similar everywhere you go. I think that'll be typical. I think for us, what that helps to do, though, is it digitizes every order. And so even though someone's getting in a store, there are now many, many, many more digitized orders, which allows people to return them more efficiently because you already have that data and information that they can just click on and power return mobily, which also allows the retailers and manufacturers to collect more data on why certain items are coming back so they can design them better, market them better, so they're less likely to come back in the first place. I also think that'll allow for down the road, making a more of a circular business platform for retailers, because once you digitize every transaction, you can make it easier years down the road for people to return that item as a trade-in. And so I think that'll digitizing a lot more of these transactions will help to make it so you actually can power a more circular economy.
On the end, I think a lot of companies are under pressure to manage the input side of their product development, especially in hard goods, where they understand the components that are there, which, to your point about digitizing, if you've got the digital supply chain up to the point of the thing produced, and then you can understand better where to take it on the downstream side. But I want to dive in a little bit on the kind of the future roadmap side of things. So as you look out, are there one or two critical things for your business that you are that you see over the next year within that context that are really important that you're looking forward to delivering? Problems you're solving?
Yeah, we're going to continue we have a lot of some interesting products that will be coming out, making the returns experiences easier and much more efficient. So easier for consumers and more efficient for retailers. So that's something we'll be working a lot on. And part of it is tying together these big logistics and storefront networks for the bigger retailers and helping to use them for smaller e-commerce retailers that don't have those infrastructures. So how can you help the retailers who have these giant invested brick and mortar infrastructures help them get more money out of them by using it, but also help them use that specialty to provide better services to the smaller e-commerce world.
Got it. So this is a downstream question for you, and we're going to plow through. We've got about 4 or 5 questions we'll go through. So kind of in summary, we know that the recycling options have gotten limited downstream, especially there was a lot of material that was going to China that's no longer going there. And many of us have read stories about how it's ending up in landfills anyway, even things that were traditionally more recyclable. Have your routing options been impacted positively or negatively as a result of that? Because I know a lot of what you're trying to do is to make sure it never gets even down to that way downstream recycling that you want them to be reused. But has that made things better or worse from you, the more constricted recycling options?
It's hurt downstream recovery a bit for some of our clients, but what we try to do and use that as a forcing mechanism where don't wait till it gets that far downstream to try to address it farther upstream and address it locally rather than having to just send these things offshore.
Got it. So before it ever ends up on in a big container ship or on a barge somewhere, let's capture it ahead of time.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And then you talked a little bit about partners, and we've had a few questions around partnerships. So if you've obviously got a bunch of them, what advice do you have, 2 or 3 things that you'd give to someone who's creating their first partnership? What are the big, I guess, pieces of advice you have for most effectively creating that partnership?
One, dream big, but also don't just take anyone that will come along. Really look at who will be the best partner for your solution at scale, and then start working on it way ahead of time. It took us, 3 years. So one of our biggest partnerships is with UPS. UPS ships the most ground goods in the country, also handles the most returns. And so our thought was, if we can partner with them and put our technology at the beginning of the returns initiation process with them, we could reduce the maximum amount of waste. And at first we were tiny when we approached them, but we literally started off with a relationship with the UPS sales rep in our area of Atlanta, Maryland at the time. And just, he then introduced us to his boss, who then introduced us to his boss, and then his boss. And then eventually, after 3 years, we got a partnership going with them. And it's been great. So I would say just really look for someone where there's mutual benefits. It was clear that there were mutual benefits for both of us. So they could help us get our product out to market more. We could help them by controlling more return shipments, and also then keeping goods out of landfills, but it ends up still shipping a lot of them to consumers and businesses to be reused. So and then even on the consolidation side, they can help get a cut. But just look for mutual benefits and start working on it ahead of time as well. And then it's just a lot of networking inside.
Yeah, I think that you put your finger on something that's really important. So I'm pile on the start early. You don't have to have everything fully baked. You don't have to have a big ta-da, especially with larger partners. They tend to take a while. And so you end up having to sort of socialize it. And that's the second thing, is that partnerships with larger companies, there tend to be multiple, sometimes dozens or even hundreds of people that are involved in cementing that relationship in place. And so building those relationships early and creating them, and then it's just going to take a while. It is a really big part of it. And I think that there's I think for a lot of startups, if you're going to go down the route of having those large partners, you need to be in for the time that comes along. You talked about 3 years to pull those partnerships together. It's not uncommon for it to take 6, 12, 18 months to get something in place. And even then, it might not be the full partnership that you wanted. It's only some piece of the puzzle. So good advice from that standpoint. When you if you think about, there's a question about a specific type of business model. Have you done anything within Optoro licensing your technology to anyone else? Are there third parties that can integrate with your system so that, let's say, point of sale systems, for example, that so you're not the one integrating with them, some other system is doing that? How do you tackle, if you have, how do you tackle that? And if you haven't, how would you help somebody think about that?
We have not licensed out our technology yet. We've talked about it with some of our bigger partners, but never have gotten around to doing it. We have licensed another company's technology that we fit within our solution to help in some of the aspects. And for us, it was just making sure that we still were integrated into the spots where we controlled the proper data that we needed for the rest of our solution, so that if for whatever reason that partnership ever ended, we still had the right data integrations. So we were really focused on that part, and then on the company side, just making sure that we were aligned with the company that we were doing that with, and like them, and had the same goals together. And you make it mutually beneficial economically as well. You never want to take advantage of a partner because eventually they'll walk away when they can. Then
I think it's just a basic reminder of commerce. I think that there needs to be, in a true partnership, there needs to be mutual benefit, and then oftentimes, especially if you're the smaller of the two organizations, and if you're a vendor or you're a supplier to others, figuring out how to make sure that the benefits lean at least a little bit into the buyer's side of things. That's kind of how commerce generally works. So the benefits to the buyer have to be just at least a little bit better than the benefits to the seller, and that tends to keep the machine running. We had a question here that's it's a bit of a hypothetical, and I'm gonna ask you to answer it first, and then I'll take a crack at it as well. So one of our audience has raised a small first round of capital. What do you think that their first priority should be? They're a consumer marketplace, so consumer-facing marketplace. What counsel do you have for somebody who's just got their first pile of money?
Trying to think back to when we got our first pile of money. I mean, the first thing we did was make sure we have the great core team in place to build our product and execute on our vision. And I see one person who was on that team who was nodding her head, yes. Hire Jess as the first person when you get that money.
I'll take my cut at it too, and we have time probably for one more question. So if anybody's got a burning question for Toby, post it now. I think that the big challenge is chances are the plan that you raised your capital on and the strategy, you probably have new information that you didn't have when you went through that process. And so it's really worth taking the time to do an assessment of where you are now and what has changed, and then assume that everything takes significantly longer than you thought. And so how you go about deploying that capital is going to be really important, because if things take longer, you may, to Toby's point, maybe you want to hire 10 people, that's your plan, but who do you start with, and how do you absorb those people into your team, and then make sure that you're making the progress that you need to along the way? So my take on it is, be really thoughtful at that moment in time about, are there changes to your strategy, and if you make an assumption that things are going to take a lot longer, what might you do, and how might you sequence things a little differently in that moment? I've got one more question for you, Toby, which is, how do you approach innovation at the company, either implementing new tech or new ideas? Having been around for 10 years, obviously in the early days, it's you and a small group of people that are doing it. Now you've got a much bigger enterprise. You've got at least 3 big areas of focus from a product development standpoint. What do you do to keep everybody?
Can you all hear me? I think frozen on.
We can hear you. And we can hear my dog. We lost Toby. All right, we'll give him 30 more seconds.
Sorry.
Back.
Lost you all for there. Can you hear me?
Yes. Were you able to hear me, or should I repeat the question?
I can't hear Scott now. Can you hear Scott? I think you asked, I heard, how do you approach innovation
Bingo.
at the company? You know, we're always just looking to what is the problem of the market and the pain of our, you know, of our clients. And often we start working from there. How can we solve the client's pains? You guys are frozen. Can you hear me?
Keep talking.
Keep talking. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, one of our main values is be collaborative, and so we love having people share their ideas throughout the company. We also love innovating and always trying to solve the next problem. You know, probably to a fault, honestly. You know, where you know, we've got the common problem of we're always, you know, there's so much we want to do, and I think for us, it's the harder part is deciding what not to do, and you know, and that's where we need to get better.
I'm going to leave it on that point. I think that's really great advice, and especially for those of us who are running smaller businesses, you know, either solopreneurs or we're much earlier. It's often about deciding what to take off the list and what to take off the plate than it is about adding more to it. So, Toby, thank you very much, and thank you for tolerating the chaos of 2020 for yourself, but also in this in our DC Startup Week Founders Focus edition of Technology Mayhem. We've pulled everything back together, and really appreciate everybody joining. Shout out to Stephanie, our ASL interpreter. Even though she doesn't want to shout herself out, she's got to do it because that's her job. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. Tomorrow we will do this again, 11 a.m. We have Joe Mechlinski, who is a New York Times bestselling author. He's the founder of Shift, which is a collective of businesses united around the common mission to revolutionize workforce engagement. So for those of you who have teams, this will be a really great session with Joe. I've gotten the chance to spend a lot of time with him. We do Founders Focus twice a week outside of DC Startup Week. So go to foundersfocus.com if you'd like to sign up. And we have fantastic guests and co-hosts each week. And we make all of our content available on YouTube, and we have a Founders Focus podcast. So you can learn more about that at foundersfocus.com. And with that, I'm going to say stay safe, stay awesome, and turn it over to Rachel, who will wrap up from DC Startup Week.
Hello, thank you so much, Scott and Toby, for being here and participating in the conversation today. Again, technical difficulties, virtual event, making it work throughout. So thank you everyone for joining back in and sticking with us. Again, we have Scott coming back tomorrow at 11 and Friday at 11. So thank you so much for that. We're kicking off our 12 p.m. sessions. We have a lunch and learn how to manage your product team. Another one on women leading in tech, rising up together. And our third lunch and learn is around operating in uncertain times, or if only stress burn calories, working within customer success. So please take a look at those on the schedule. Feel free to pop right on them, grab a bite to eat and learn at the same time. So excited to see you there. Jam-packed schedule the rest of the afternoon. So thank you again to Scott and Tobin for being here and participating today. And Scott, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at 11.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. See you tomorrow.